He thought he was just passing through that crumbling mansion. But every choice he made pulled him deeper into a story far darker than he ever intended to write. Sunset Boulevard isn't just about a fading star. It's about a narrator who slowly becomes the victim of his own silence, his compromises, and his hunger for survival. Once you uncover these 16 hidden truths, this classic will never look the same again. Tap like, subscribe, and follow me into Part 1. Part 1. Despising the dream. Yet clinging to it. Mocking dreams but still holding on. The main character sneers at the Hollywood dream, yet clings to it like the last life raft. In that mind, all the slogans about the dream of cinema have long turned hollow. Money pressure, debts, rejected scripts make everything around feel like a cruel joke. And yet, every time there is a chance to cling to some fragile promise, a small, annoying spark of hope rises inside. The mouth says it hates it. The mouth makes fun of it. But the eyes still follow the studio gates and the billboards, as if something behind them could rescue a life sliding downhill. That contradiction is the first rope tying this person to a path that is constantly denied out loud. Part 2. Accepting decline in exchange for safety. Trading freedom for a temporary roof. The decision to stay in the decaying mansion is not just about having no other options, but about starting to accept a convenient kind of captivity. When shelter appears in the form of a crumbling estate, the mind insists it is only a temporary solution. A place to sleep, a roof, a few meals. It all sounds reasonable for someone evicted from an apartment and hounded by the bank. But beneath that practical reasoning lies a dangerous feeling of relief. No rent to worry about. No need to face failure out on the streets. That safety, though bought at the cost of independence, reveals a pattern that will repeat. Whenever cornered, this person is willing to let someone else decide their fate, as long as it means not having to stare failure in the face. Part 3. Letting someone else rewrite the story. Letting another control the words. The main character agrees to bend and reshape the story to someone else's will, fully aware that it distorts the truth. Writing is supposed to be the one place left where there is some control, choosing words, scenes, endings. Yet when the script is forced to serve the illusion of another fragile mind, there is not a full rebellion. Part of the mind is irritated watching every line be edited, added to, inflated. Another part simply surrenders to the chance of paying off debts and staying afloat in this world. That surrender creates a deep crack. If even the story on the page no longer belongs to its writer, how long can life outside keep any sense of authorship? The first time the words are allowed to be bent for convenience is also the first time dignity gets pushed under the weight of dependence. Part 4. Turning a relationship of use into something natural. Normalizing mutual exploitation. A relationship built on cold exchange slowly gets rationalized as natural, even though something feels fundamentally off inside. At first, everything is given a pretty name, mutual benefit. One person needs money and a roof. The other needs presence, needs a witness for ongoing performances. Then the dinners, the gifts, the small promises pile up, weaving into a net that's hard to escape. The main character sees the dependent gaze, senses the almost desperate longing in the other's expectations, yet instead of cutting things off, continues playing the role of companion, because it's more convenient than walking away. Each time the eyes close and let something slide, the mind is pulled deeper into a bond where both sides are using and being used at the same time. Part 5. Using sarcasm to dodge responsibility. Hiding behind bitter jokes. The sharp, cynical comments are not just aimed at others, but also serve as a strategy to avoid feeling guilty. In every awkward situation, sarcasm appears like an old suit of armor. Rather than admitting this relationship is unhealthy, the inner voice reframes it as a dark Hollywood joke. That way, it becomes possible to watch things go wrong while still feeling superior, more clear-eyed than everyone else. But the more this habit of using irony to keep distance repeats, the harder it becomes to look directly at the truth. That same supposed clarity is the excuse used to stay, to keep taking benefits, to cross lines that were once looked down on. Part 6. Ignoring the ever-clearer signs of delusion. Pretending not to see the danger. Clearer and clearer signs of delusion still are not enough to make the main character break away, because that would mean losing a temporary lifeline. Conversations drift further from reality. Declarations of a glorious comeback grow more absurd, and reactions to any criticism become more extreme. All of these are obvious warnings that things are far from normal. Inside, there is worry and brief moments of wondering if this house is a mental powder keg waiting to blow. But then the fear of going back to debt, to rejection, to loneliness on the streets wins again. Once more, the inner voice chooses silence, softens words, refuses to shatter someone else's fantasy. Not out of kindness, but out of fear of losing shelter and being forced to stand alone on already tired legs. Part 7. Accepting betrayal to cling to a new chance. Trading fragile loyalty for a new door. When a new writing opportunity appears elsewhere, the main character hesitates but still steps into the gray zone between loyalty and betrayal. There is a deep hunger to return to a real creative environment, to sit with younger people and talk about ideas without having to bend everything to one person's fantasy. Yet every step toward that new opportunity is also a step farther away from someone pouring feelings into this presence. The mind sees this clearly, but still sneaks away, sneaks off to meetings, writes in secret. Right and wrong stop being clean lines and become a string of small choices that steadily pushes the old relationship closer to the brink. Each decision to keep quiet, each attempt to avoid an honest talk adds another brick to the wall of betrayal rising between them. Part 8. Turning another's tragedy into material. Using pain as raw material, while observing the other's collapse, the main character quietly turns those wounds into fuel for a personal story. A writer's sensitivity records every detail. Eyes glued to old screens, lines repeated over and over, sudden outbursts followed by long, eerie silences. Artistically, it is a goldmine, a living portrait of the price of faded fame. But every time the thought flashes, this would make a great scene, the mind goes silent rather than admit the obvious. Someone else's broken soul is being plundered as inspiration. The unsettling truth is that even when feeling pity, this person still stands as observer, collector, storyteller, transforming another's tragedy into narrative material. Part 9. Addicted to being worshipped, despite knowing it's fake. Dependent on artificial adoration, over-the-top praise and obsessive idolization cause both fear and addiction within the main character. To be treated as the center of the universe, inside that locked house, every movement noticed, every word carefully listened to, is a feeling the outside world never granted. Deep down, there is an awareness that this worship is unhealthy, born from fear of abandonment and a desperate need to feel loved and needed. Yet every time the mind considers leaving, the memory of being seen as unique, irreplaceable, pulls it back. The pattern repeats: contempt, irritation, desire to escape, followed by a return to the role of the adored one, because the world outside only sees this name as one more in a long list of the rejected. Part 10. Watching from the sidelines and blaming circumstance. Always framing self as outsider. The main character often retells events as if being accidentally dragged in, conveniently dodging their real role in the unfolding tragedy. Internally, the story is built on a familiar motif: circumstances, coincidences, surprises, just catching a ride, just staying for a while, just a random collaboration. This framing allows the mind to feel dragged along rather than responsible. Each step deeper into the house, each favor accepted, each ignored warning sign gets labeled as no other choice. In reality, choices always existed. They just came with the price of loneliness and facing failure head-on. By constantly placing the self as an unwilling observer, the main character avoids saying the most honest line: "Everything that happened, I helped create." Part 11. Only truly afraid. When reputation is at risk. Waking up only when career is threatened. Many extreme behaviors go unchecked until the threat of being dragged down professionally becomes undeniable. The emotional instability, the unrealistic calls, the bizarre gifts, all of this has been evident for a while. Yet only when the risk appears that their name and craft will be tied to a ridiculous comeback does true panic set in. Suddenly, the most frightening thing is not anger, jealousy, or volatile mood swings, but the image of being known throughout Hollywood as the writer who enabled one last delusional performance. This late awakening exposes a hidden corner. Sometimes, what hits the deepest fear is not human suffering, but the possible loss of the last shred of professional self-respect. Part 12. The habit of running. Only at the last minute. Leaving only when everything breaks. The decision to cut ties comes not when things are still salvageable, but when almost all exits are already blocked. The idea of leaving that house has appeared in the mind many times, each time accompanied by a vague plan. Return the gifts, explain honestly, choose a hard but independent life. Yet after every argument, every spike and drop in tension, the person remains, procrastinating and waiting for a better time. The pattern mirrors itself. Let everything pile up until emotions explode, then act in haste and despair. Living this way means every escape is noisy, messy, and damaging, rather than a calm, early choice. Part 13. Accepting life as a shadow in a rotting house. Blending into the decay. Slowly, the main character becomes not just a guest, but a living piece of the house's gloomy atmosphere. At first, everything feels strange. Heavy curtains, an empty pool, dusty projection rooms. Over time, the strangeness turns into routine. Old silent films, tiny parties with a handful of ghosts from another era, conversations that circle endlessly around a distant golden age. All of it seeps into the mind like damp into the walls. The person does not leave, but never fully belongs either, hovering like a shadow drifting from room to room. The chilling truth is this: stay long enough in a crumbling space, and it becomes easy to forget that you are slowly crumbling too, just at a slightly slower rate. Part 14. Wanting to be honest. When it's already too late. Truth arrives too late. One clear, firm conversation might have changed the course of things. But it only happens when everything has passed the breaking point. Inside, there have been many imagined honest talks about suffocating emotions, about boundaries, about the impossibility of continuing to share a mutual illusion. But these conversations stay in the imagination, postponed out of fear of tears, of rage, of emotional manipulation. Only after extreme actions explode does the truth finally come out. Sharp, raw, almost cruel. At that moment, there is no room left for repair. The late truth becomes a double-edged sword, both an attempt at escape and the final cut pushing everything into a point of no return. Part 15. A climax that was always coming. No distance left between observer and victim. In the end, the main character is no longer recounting events from afar, but fully caught inside the very Hollywood tragedy once mocked. Throughout the journey, it feels like this person stands at the edge, commenting, analyzing, making cynical remarks. Yet the further things go, the thinner that line becomes. Panic, shattered expressions, dreamlike footsteps on the staircase. They all connect back to the same repeating chain of choices. Compromise, silence, delay, ignoring warnings. The violent end does not land as a complete shock. It feels like the inevitable summation of every earlier refusal to confront reality. When the timeline closes, the supposedly clear-eyed narrator realizes, in that house, no one is truly an audience. Anyone who walks in becomes part of the story, whether they intend to or not. Part 16. The final truth about the storyteller. Despising the path but still walking it. The main character mocks Hollywood's tragic endings, yet unconsciously follows the exact same trajectory. From the start, there are sharp lines about the industry, its shallowness, careless producers, stars who refuse to admit time has passed. It sounds like the voice of someone awake in a sleepwalking crowd. But every small choice, agreeing to stay, accepting favors, staying silent before delusion, using sarcasm to escape, running only at the last minute, redraws the curve into the very shape of those old stories. The only difference is that this time, the narrator stands inside the frame, not holding the pen outside it. And that is the final truth few want to face. Often, what is most despised is the very future self that is feared. And without a decisive turn in another direction, the path mocked from a distance ends up being the exact one walked to the end.